Welcome to the What Really Happened radio show. Putting America first, second, and third. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It's Thursday, October 17th, 2013. Sure, happy it's Thursday. Sure, happy it's Thursday. Sure, happy it's Thursday. We've got a lot of stuff to talk about today in our third hour. John McAfee, antivirus pioneer, computer expert, will be joining us to talk about his new efforts to defeat the NSA spying on law-abiding citizens. We're also going to be poking some fun at the very obvious shortcomings of the computer system that was set up to operate Obamacare, and it's just turned into an absolute flustercluck. And we're actually seeing samples of the source code that were recklessly left on the healthcare.gov server, and it betrays a very reckless, poorly planned programming style, if you will. And for anybody who's worked in large-scale software development, you'll look at it and say, why are they doing this? This is completely insane. This was just literally thrown together, hacked together, shoot-from-the-hip coding. And it doesn't really make any sense. $600 million this thing cost? I could have coded this thing up on a weekend if I had enough coffee. Anyway, moving right on, a couple of program notes in addition to John McAfee today. Next Wednesday, Keith Johnson from Activist Post will be joining us for a brief chat. On Thursday, Brandon Turbeville, also from Activist Post, will be joining us to talk about Syria and Egypt. And, of course, Claire will be on the microphone in our third hour tomorrow. Now, obviously, the big news today is that last night, very late, the House voted on the Senate budget deal and passed it overwhelmingly. Now, remember, under the Constitution, revenue measures are supposed to originate in the House, and the Senate gets to go yes or no. So they were pulling a fast one yet again, just like they did on TARP, but now they know we're on to them. And I noticed the corporate media was putting out this story that because the Senate bill copied some language from one of the proposed House bills, that really this meant it was a House bill, and they could evade Article 1, Section 7 of the Constitution that way, and no, they can't. They're just breaking the rules to get what they want. And I'm sure over in Washington, D.C., they're celebrating, saying, hooray, we did it. We kept the wars. We kept the Fed. We kept the NSA. We kept Obamacare. We dumped a ton of debt on our future generations. And those idiot voters actually think we did something good. No, we didn't. We know what you did. And even the corporate media yesterday, when they were building the drama to the House vote, was going on and saying, this isn't a fix. They just raised the debt ceiling and kicked the can into the first part of next year. And I'm sure part of that is they don't want the American people fretting about the budget and the debt and all the coming taxes and Obamacare, because we need the American public in a very good mood because we're going into that holiday shopping season. And if they don't run down to the shopping mall and max out their credit cards for all kinds of stuff they don't really need, the terrorists will win. And it's just all for show. And even on Fox News, they were saying, this doesn't solve anything. You know, and they build all the drama and the suspense, and everybody's supposed to say, huzzah, huzzah, there's a deal, and we break out the champagne and we throw the confetti. But it is not a solution. It doesn't address the core problems. They still remain. This is all window dressing to say, see, we did something. We accomplished something. The U.S. government is still $220 trillion in debt and just went a little deeper. They raised the debt ceiling, they say only temporarily, but we know it's going to be permanent. They're going to get to January of next year, and they're going to say, well, we can't lower the debt ceiling, we can't pay it down. They did that last January. They've been cheating their own federal workers' pension plans just to keep this little Ponzi scheme going. And contrary to what Obama said, yes, raising the debt ceiling does increase the debt of the United States of America that is going to be put onto your great-great-great-great-grandchildren to pay without their consent. These future generations that this debt is being put onto never got a chance to vote whether or not they would go along with this deal. Everybody who supported raising the debt ceiling is, in effect, enslaving future generations to that debt. We're wearing slave chains. They're paper chains. They're made out of those Federal Reserve notes, but they're still slave chains, as long as you believe this is the way it's supposed to be. And, of course, another problem that has not gone away, they're still looting you, the American people, with Obamacare and carbon taxes and anything else they can think of. And we've just been sold deeper into the slavery of the Fed and the IMF. Nothing substantive has really changed. And even the corporate media talking heads are saying, yeah, this didn't really fix anything at all. This is just Congress raising the debt ceiling, which we knew they were going to do, and trying to sell this, that this has accomplished something good, and it has not, because it did not deal with those central problems. And again, the question, and now we have until January to get this question before the American people. Why, when the Constitution authorizes the government to create and issue interest-free currency, is this government going to borrow that currency at interest from a privately owned central bank? Now, the U.S. government doesn't want you asking that question. You've certainly never seen that question on the corporate media, and you never will. Because corporate media goes to those same bankers to get the funding to build those big TV studios and buy all that expensive hardware. And so corporate media will never, ever, ever, ever ask that question. And it's up to you, the American people, to do that. This nation was started with an economic model of the government issuing the public currency as a public utility interest-free. And we have a government that sold out to the bankers 100 years ago to enslave you and future generations into this artificially created out of thin air debt obligation that should not even exist under the economic model this nation started with. And they don't want you asking that question. But this is the time when you need to ask it, and you need to ask it of all your friends, and just say, if you have a currency that you can use without accruing interest to a bank, why are we using a currency that's borrowed at interest from that private bank? That's the very system of banking we fought a revolution to be free of. Now, there's a bizarre story coming out about this woman who made her way to the microphone during the vote on the House floor. And it's been reported a couple of different ways. Now, the microphone at the podium was turned off at the time, so we just see her gesturing and mouthing, and eventually she's grabbed and basically escorted out of the room, and the last word is she's been sent to a hospital for a mental health evaluation. So whatever she says when she comes out, you shouldn't listen to because she's crazy, whatever she was saying. It's been reported that she was talking about God and the Freemasons. Another report was she was telling Congress you can't serve two masters. There is an audio put out purportedly by her that was put out as an audio only. And when I tried to sync it up to the C-SPAN video, it doesn't seem to line up. So I suspect that audio was manufactured to try and obfuscate whatever it is she really said. And there's the bottom line. We don't know what she said because the microphone was off. The people in the House knew what she said. They got upset by it. They were pounding the gavels and calling for silence and all the rest of that situation here. And, of course, I think Americans are looking back and realizing what did get shut down during this whole high drama of the government shutdown. And remember, they only shut down a teensy tiny part of the government. The spying on Americans continued. The wars continued. The propping up of Wall Street continued. What did they cut? They cut services for needy children. They closed all the national parks and monuments, which they don't really have a right to do. They literally cherry-picked the parts of the government to shut down to maximize the propaganda impact on you. I'm sure if they had shut down a couple of these boondoggle weapons programs at the Pentagon, most Americans would have said, yeah, good idea. But they deliberately picked the national monuments, and they actually spent more money keeping those monuments and parks closed than it would have cost to just leave them open, leave the parking lot at Mount Rushmore open. So it picks up a little extra litter over the few days. They were punishing you for refusing to go along with plunging this nation further into debt. Now, the stock market... Oh, we've got to take a break for commercials. My goodness, I almost talked myself right off the air here. We'll be back after these words from our sponsors. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And I'm noticing on Fox News that Obama is out there pushing for immigration reform. We've got to do the immigration reform. We've got to grant amnesty to all these people and everything like that. And I think what we're going to see probably over the next few days, certainly through the weekend, is the corporate media is just going to be putting out all kinds of stories to try and distract your attention away from this so-called debt ceiling deal, which was just passed by the Congress, for the simple reason that it did not actually solve any of the problems. They just got themselves a new credit card. which they're immediately going to max out by trying to get the war going with Iran and various other things. We know that this debt ceiling increase isn't temporary. They'll get to January and say, well, we've maxed out that debt ceiling. We can't ramp it back down to where it was before. We're going to have to raise it again. This government is hopelessly debt-stricken and broke. It can't even pay the interest on the debt, let alone the principal. I don't think this government's made a payment on the principal of all its borrowing in decades. And none of that debt would exist if we had stayed with the monetary system this nation was founded with. Now, I understand when you borrow money from other countries and foreign and private investors, you will pay interest on that. But the reason the debt can never be paid off in this country is because all of the public currency in circulation enters circulation as a loan at interest from the Federal Reserve. And every president who has tried to push for an interest-free public currency gets shot at. In fact, I just got an email from somebody saying both McKinley and Garfield were for the gold standard and debt-free money. And they got shot at. This is a nation being run by the bankers. And I reject that form of government, first of all, because these bankers are not elected, and they're certainly not interested in the welfare of the general nation. They're just interested in their own greed and money junkie behavior. Now, something very bizarre is going on with the stock market this morning, and I first noticed it on the Yahoo ticker on my iPhone. And originally I thought it was maybe Yahoo, but I'm also seeing it on Fox News. If you look at the actual numbers and the chart for the Dow Jones Industrial Average, it's up about 200. But it's being displayed and reported as slightly in the red. It's currently showing as minus 52, and it's been that way now for more than an hour. Now, maybe the Dow Jones people hired some of those leftover programmers from the Obamacare computer system, or maybe it's the beginning of the virtual 9/11 that we've been talking about, but it's very obvious there's been a major, major goof, and their system is not designed to correct that goof. But it is out there. I mean, you can see it on Fox News. The Dow is actually up about 200 points. And it's showing it in the red, 52, and that's absolutely not accurate. So just a reminder how unreliable all these systems have become here. Now, Lyndon LaRouche and his PAC have launched an ad campaign to remind everybody that there has been a move, and certainly a lot of pressure, for Congress to bring back Glass-Steagall. Now, Glass-Steagall was originally passed in the 1930s in response to the very reckless banker behavior that helped contribute to the crash of 1929. In particular, the merging of depositor banks with investment banks. Now, when you go down and you open a savings account or you've got a checking account, you're dealing with a depositor bank that functions with depositor funds. Investment banks are private. They don't have doors where you can go in and say, here's $100. The people who are in the investment bank are private investors who pledge millions of their own dollars and are willing to accept the risk for losses for high venture or high risk investments. Now, in the 1920s, investment banks and depositor banks started to merge, and the investment banks started making high risk investments using depositor funds. And so Glass-Steagall was passed saying you cannot do that. Now, fast forward to 2008, when Travelers merged with Citicorp to form Citibank. And we had a merger banned by Glass-Steagall of a depositor bank and an investment bank that was starting to play fast and loose with depositor funds. So not to worry, Congress leapt into action, and in 1999 they repealed Glass-Steagall. In fact, insiders were calling it the Citigroup Relief Act to get them off the hook for having broken the law. And of course, with Glass-Steagall repealed, the bankers immediately went back to the same reckless behavior, merging investment banks with depositor banks and using depositor funds for very reckless investments, including into mortgage-backed securities, which led to all these failures and FDIC getting drained and all of this hardship all over the place. So there's been a move in recent years to reinstate Glass-Steagall, or something very much like it. Now, obviously, Wall Street's opposed to it. They're just absolutely frothing at the mouth that regulation is bad for the banking sector. And it may be bad for the banking sector, but it's certainly good for the rest of the country. And we do need to bring this back. And part of the official job of the United States federal government is to balance the greed of the money junkies with the needs of the nation as a whole. And they've dropped the ball on that one quite obviously. And a lot of people were saying that in the brouhaha over the debt ceiling, that the bankers' lobbyists were maneuvering to say, see, we can't bring back Glass-Steagall, it'll just make the debt problem worse. But Lyndon LaRouche is back out there saying, no, more than ever, we need to get these banks brought back under control. Too big to fail is a license to steal and manipulate. And we've seen where that got us. We're going to grab a phone call here. Scott in Wisconsin. Aloha, Scott. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mikey. How you doing, brother? I got to ask you a question. Mikey, what year is your car you said you were driving?
It's 13 years old.
Okay, mine is, my Saturn's over 96, so that would be how many years? Mikey, there was something that came to me last night, way back when these guys, you got to understand behind the big picture with this situation after they did the house swap. They came out and threw that little, like I told you in the past, that little line out for the car swap. You guys bring your cars in and we'll give you $8,000 to buy a new one. Well, I found out, Mikey, last night, what year, I wanted to ask you, when did they start putting New York City under these hoods with all these computer parts? Do you know?
It's kind of been growing all along. I mean, my car's a 2000. It has a computer that manages the engine ignition system, but it doesn't have any external links. It doesn't have GPS or any of that other stuff. So it's been kind of a long, slow process, but it all goes back to getting rid of the old breaker points and distributor type ignition and replacing it with electronic ignition, and then over time they've computerized more and more of the car in the name of maximizing fuel efficiency, which is a good thing. But certainly the latest generation of cars, and I think this goes back 3 or 4 years, they're completely computerized with traction control, where when you're driving the car, you're telling the computer where you want to go, and the computer sort of gets the car where it thinks you want to go. It's been proven they can be hacked. I actually don't like driving them. When our Xterra ate its engine for the second time, we were forced to rent a couple of cars while looking to buy the car that we have now. And I remember one vehicle in particular, when I was driving it with the traction control, it almost felt like I was on the verge of losing control, because that instinctive link between wheel and behavior of the car was broken. And it just felt very, very weird, and I was always turning off the traction control. But we know now that cars do have GPS and Wi-Fi and Bluetooth and all the rest of that stuff built in, and there's no security. They can be hacked from outside.
Well, Michael, I just wanted to say this, but Michael, I think you might be above water with yours. But here's the thing: and should the grid go off and the satellites get disrupted, all those new cars that have all that nice dilly stuff in it, they ain't gonna run.
No, I disagree.
They're controlled.
They're not dependent.
A lot of them are controlled, Mikey, with all these computer parts.
I have to disagree. Got to let you go. Got to take a break for commercials. I'll respond to this when we come back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And responding to Scott's call, if the computer grid net goes down, those services in your car, which depend on the outside, like GPS mapping, OnStar, if you have a cell phone system built into the car, those will quit working. There's no question about that. But the cars will go on running. They're not dependent on those satellite systems for their operation. Now, that's not to say that they're not full of problems. I'm a huge fan of Top Gear, the British version. And Jeremy Clarkson absolutely does not like all this new modern computerization. He hates traction control, and I very much identify with him on that. They had a recent show where he got this Ford supercar he had been lusting for. He literally waited 2 years to get this thing delivered. They told him it would be a year because it was a big custom build-up job, and it actually dragged under 2 years. And on the day he got it, he couldn't drive it home from the studios where they were shooting Top Gear because of a problem in the security system, not recognizing that he was supposed to be driving it. He took it back, and he towed it back, got it fixed, and then again he's driving to work in his own car, and he's getting these constant text messages, your car has been stolen, your car has been stolen. So there's a lot of problems with these computerized car systems because the quality of software being developed in this country really is not very good. Just look at Obamacare, because everybody's cutting corners and cutting costs, and they just slap anything together they think is going to get the end. They don't have quality insurance and testing, and it was a huge strategic mistake for Ford to send a car this buggy to Jeremy Clarkson at Top Gear, because he was not shy about giving them a well-reserved thrashing about the head and shoulders. All right, we're going to grab a couple more phone calls here. Ralph in California. Aloha, Ralph. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha. Hey, Michael. Hey, on the Glass-Steagall, I've been in contact with Lyndon Roush's PAC, a gentleman named Gerald that I keep in contact, and they've been doing this for about a good 4 years plus, or
yes,
even more maybe. But, so anyways, there's a lady that I get information on, a Congresswoman named Marcy Kaptur.
Yes.
Yeah, she does an excellent job when she's on the floor talking about Glass-Steagall, where it needs to be coming back. Because we all know that Clinton finally put the death nail on it, and everything else happened regarding the economy with the banking. So she's really, well, there's one, you know, you can pull up several speeches, I guess, and one time she was just able to describe it, how it came about, how everything, and then she tied in with Detroit at the time, and just beautiful job. So anybody that wants to listen to her is Marcy Kaptur. She's a Democrat from Ohio. She does a wonderful job. But anyways, I plan on going next Tuesday to my local city council to bring up information about Glass-Steagall. So anybody that's interested, they should look it up. It needs to come back. But what gets me real quick, Michael, FDR, I think, was a traitor to the nation regarding Hawaii, you know, with December 7th, Pearl Harbor.
Yes.
But he brings this in, to Glass-Steagall. So what gives? I kind of get a mixed message where he put that in place, stopped the banking, but he was part of the cabal, was he not?
Well, actually, Franklin Roosevelt was not well liked by the Wall Street bankers. In fact, they actually tried to organize a coup d'etat against him to bring in a fascist government to the United States of America, similar to what was going on in Mussolini's Italy at the same time. And they tapped a gentleman, Marine Corps Major General Smedley Butler, to lead the coup because he was insanely popular with all of the rank-and-file military. And Smedley Butler pretended to go along with the coup until he had all the evidence he needed, and then he blew the whistle to Congress and to Roosevelt. And the bankers on Wall Street simply told the government, look, if you arrest any one of us, we'll crash your economy and destroy the New Deal deliberately. And this, they were still reeling from the effects of the crash of '29 and the Great Depression. And so it was all hushed up. It wasn't declassified, I think, until 1964. And the book and the movie, 7 Days in May, was actually based on that aborted coup d'etat. But, of course, Hollywood being as subservient to the bankers as anybody else, the movie version completely removed the influence of the bankers, and they made the character that was based on Smedley Butler the bad guy, which was a tremendous insult to his memory. Smedley Butler, of course, is also famous for a treatise, All War is a Racket, that you really ought to hunt down and read if you have not already done so. But Franklin Roosevelt and his New Deal were absolutely hated by Wall Street and the bankers, because you need to understand, Wall Street and the bankers are by their very nature fascistic. They want a governmental model where the wealth just flows to them automatically, where if they make money, they can keep it, and if they lose money, the losses are transferred onto the people. Roosevelt was trying to rebalance the economy with the New Deal, to try and get currency back into circulation at all levels of the society. And I know he was screamed at for being a communist, because that's what fascists always scream when somebody tries to interfere with their little bitty gain there. But absolutely, Roosevelt was opposed by the Wall Street bankers, and they did everything they could to wreck the New Deal, to end the gold standard, to force the world back on to doing business using banknotes borrowed from their banks at interest.
Okay, but at the same time, Roosevelt was, because he wanted the war in Hawaii, and the main purpose is what?
Well, Roosevelt wanted war against Nazi Germany. And the reason he did that, he was coming in to aid Britain. Primarily, Britain wanted the war with Nazi Germany because the Nazis had kicked out their private central bank that was imposed on them by the Treaty of Versailles after World War I, and they had started operating with a government-issued value-based currency that just lit Germany up, turned their economy around, got rid of the Weimar inflation. It was called the German miracle in the American press, and people were starting to say, boy, what is Germany doing that we're not doing? And that, of course, was something the bankers of the United States and Great Britain absolutely did not want to be known. So they organized a global boycott against Germany, trying to crush down that economy before too many people said, hey, what they're doing is working. And Germany was building up their manufacturing. They were starting to export products. They were an economic powerhouse, because the reality is that a nation that does not have their work products siphoned off by these private central banks is going to do very, very well. And nations that are enslaved to private central banks cannot possibly compete. And I think it was Winston Churchill saying that, you know, if we allow Germany to remarket or to rebuild, you know, we will have fought World War I in vain, because, again, it was all about shutting down economic competition. Because at that time, Great Britain was still enslaved to the Bank of England. They were finally forced to nationalize it after the pound lost its global status to the U.S. dollar following Bretton Woods. But that's really what was driving all of that. And right now, look at any nation that tries to operate an honest monetary system, like Libya. Set up a state central bank, a gold dinar, immediate invade, kill the leader, give them a brand new private central bank issuing the public currencies alone in interest. That is really the top of many motives behind this push to war. To force the world back onto Bretton Woods, to force the world back into the slavery of the private central bankers, to force resource-rich areas to sell those resources only for the U.S. dollar, to keep this little banker scam going a little bit longer.
Well, thank you, Michael, for clarifying that.
All right, and we're going to switch over to Tim in New Mexico. Aloha, Tim. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Oh, Mike. Oh, there we go. Aloha, Mike. Hey, just a quickie. Actually, the Yahoo ticker's fine. You're misinterpreting it. It gapped down this morning. If you go to your 1 week view, you'll see a big gap down. So it's up from this morning, where you show it starting at 9:30 this morning and climbing, but it's down 44 points from yesterday.
Well, but earlier today, the Dow was showing plus 200, and it didn't do this drop down into the minus 45 until the middle of the trading day. So even if it closed down 40 yesterday, if it was up 200, you know,
it was up 200 at the end of the day. At least the 1 week chart is showing it up about 200 and then dropped 150. Now, whether you got a 200 that flashed by up or something, that might be an error. But relative to what the chart is showing and what it's showing on your ticker, it's down about 44 points from the close of yesterday, but it's up from what the graph says.
All right. Well, I'll take another look at that, but it was showing up 200 earlier in the day, and then it did this drop down. So there was a goof someplace, and
that would be an error.
Okay. All right. Well, maybe that was the error, but it did call attention to itself when it happened. And
yeah, great.
All right. Thank you for the call, and we're going to switch over to Art off the grid. Actually, no, we're coming up on a commercial break, so we're going to hold Art off until we come back from these next words from our sponsors. Now, just so you know, it is not gone. We are already hearing about representatives saying it's time to float another standalone bill to defund Obamacare. So this is not going away, and this is an issue that Obama might destroy himself on, and I'll explain when we come back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And before we go to the phones here, I want to finish up on this comment about Obamacare, because there's already word of yet another standalone bill in the House of Representatives to defund Obamacare. Now, of course, the supporters of Obamacare out there saying, it's the law, and once it's the law, that's it. And that, of course, is complete nonsense. Bad laws get repealed and rescinded all the time in our nation's history. Slavery was rescinded. Prohibition was rescinded. It was recognized these were bad ideas, and we dealt with it. Now, there have already been many attempts to defund or repeal Obamacare in the House that have failed to muster enough votes. And it is a given that Obama will veto any bill that passes the Congress, because he's coming from a position, first of all, of his ego. They're already starting to call him a lame duck for the rest of his term. And his influence is starting to wane in many, many issues. And second of all, the American people who have been over to that absolutely disastrous computer system being forced to sign up and provide all their information and only then be shown how expensive the Obamacare-compliant health insurance packages are going to be. They're now opposed to Obamacare. Now, Obama needs this to go forward because his name is on it, and he needs it to go forward because what this really represents is a $200 billion a year cash grab. That's the government's share of the expected trillions of dollars windfall to these health insurance companies who are now selling health insurance policies for a lot more money and having to pay out a lot less in benefits because of those sky-high deductibles. And Obama needs that windfall of an added $200 billion a year in estimated tax revenues in order to lure lenders, because just raising the debt ceiling doesn't solve the problem if nobody will loan this government any more money. And that's why he's still pushing this as hard as he can, and it's just a cash grab. If this government were really worried about your health, they would be looking at those toxic adjuvants in vaccines. They'd be looking at the well-documented cases where these SSRI prescription antidepressants are triggering acts of suicide and violence. They'd be looking at the average 400,000 Americans every year killed by medical mistakes in this country. But they're not. It's just a cash grab. Okay, Art off the grid, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Oh, hey, Mike. Well, I originally called in to talk about education, but just real quick, this standalone bill to go against Obamacare again. Look, I can debunk the entire validity of the Affordable Health Care Act with one simple argument. All bills pertaining to the raising of revenue must originate in the House. That bill did not originate in the House because in order to have originated in the House, it would have had to have been authored by House representatives, and they are not the ones who wrote that bill.
Okay, now, actually, technically, it has to be presented by a member of the House, but obviously lobbyists and corporations will pre-write the bill, take it to some Congress critter that they funded in the last campaign and say, please introduce this. You know, the president will do that. He'll have a bill he wants to move forward, and he'll go to a member of the House and say, you need to introduce this. It is actually not in the Constitution that a member of the House of Representatives has to write the bill themselves. Now, originally they did. That was their job, but it's actually not a requirement. But there's no question that Obamacare was written by the health insurance companies and their lobbyists and then presented as a complete package saying if you get this passed into law, we will share some of the largesse from the windfall trillions of dollars in profits, not only in tax revenues for the U.S. government, but generous campaign donations in your future elections.
Well, the point here is no one can argue constitutional government unless they act in a constitutional fashion, and that means going back to the way the constitutional government actually worked, where Congress wrote the bills. Period. Not lobbyists, not special interest groups. Anyway, on education, I wanted you to comment on something I heard today. Now, we understand on education, all we have to do is go back and look at the founding of the Rockefeller Foundation and how they began to take control of the curriculum in the schools, and they decided what was going to be in the history books and in all the other books and all this other garbage. Mm-hmm. We look at a beautiful documentary on Maggie Rodden's website, theunsolicitedopinion.com. It's called Cultural Marxism, Corruption of America, where they discuss this issue of how the education system has been used to indoctrinate the children, and on and on and on. And everyone who knows me knows that I am absolutely in favor of local communities taking back control of their schools and deciding within the individual states and the communities themselves what the curriculum is to be for their children, and tell the federal government and the education department to go stuff it. And if you can't do that, go back to homeschooling and work together. A group of parents, bring your children together a couple days a week, educate them, and then spend the rest of the time teaching them what they need to know in the real world. That's my attitude towards education.
Well, I'm absolutely in agreement with you. I mean, if you live in a small farming community out in the middle of Nebraska, you obviously want the children who are being educated in your school to be learning about agricultural, issues, repair of farm machinery, stuff that will give them the skills to integrate to that current economic model. Now, what we consider to be public education goes all the way back to what was called the Prussian model, where Prussia, which was starting to build their war machine, instituted public schools with teachers in order to indoctrinate their children with the Prussian cultural values of war and aggression and so forth, and it worked very well. Prussia was a major power because they literally grew up a population of very aggressive pro-war young adults, and so other nations began to adopt that model. On one hand, it's a way of bringing education together into the hands of somebody who knows how to do it, but I'm absolutely in agreement that it should be, all about educating the young people to take a role in their local community. And yes, people move around and they pick other careers and so forth and so on, but our current education system right now is almost wholly about indoctrination, and that's nothing new. We were getting indoctrination when I was in grade school, but it was fit in between math and science and engineering and agriculture because I grew up in farming country. But these days, it's just totally into just convincing these little kids that global warming is real. You will grow up to pay carbon taxes. War is good. The Muslims hate us. And I don't agree with everything that Phyllis Schlafly says, but on the issue of Common Core, I absolutely agree. And it's not just Rockefeller, because Andrew Carnegie also funded a foundation, the Carnegie Foundation, and their educational objectives was to have the working class of America only given as much education as it took to run the machines and fill out the paperwork, and that their little heads should not be troubled with any more complex and sophisticated thinking.
Right. And, well, I'm getting to my question. Well, this is what I want you to comment on. Today, and we've heard Phyllis Schlafly talking about Common Core, and I think she does a great job of exposing what it is. And there's been a lot of other people who've come on various different shows here on RBN to talk about Common Core, and they've all done an outstanding job. But today, I'm listening to Nancy Pelosi, and she came out today. It was on C-SPAN. You can catch it every week when she comes out and gives her weekly legislative address to the reporters and takes some questions. She only spent like maybe a minute briefly mentioning education. And she had the nerve, and this is what I want you to comment on, that the quickest and easiest way to bring money into the Treasury was through education. Mike, my jaw hit the floor when she said this. You see a problem here?
Well, actually, it depends on the context of her comment. We have to rush because we're coming up on a commercial break, and Phyllis Schlafly as well here. Obviously, to compete in a global marketplace, you have to have an educated population that is able to compete in science, technology, and engineering. The problem I have with Common Core is those subjects are de-emphasized because they're trying to create a population that can't think critically or analytically about what's going on around them, and as a result, we're creating a population of young people that can't go out and find jobs. And this is why we have so many corporations who are importing all these H-1B visa workers, because they've got the skills that our kids coming out of public school do not. Okay? Art, got to let you go. Got to take a break for Phyllis Schlafly and commercials, and we will be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And the corporate media is busy with their job of just throwing all kinds of stories up there so that you won't be really thinking about the fact that yesterday's deal in the Congress didn't actually solve the problems with the nation. They just kicked that can down the road a little bit further, and that can has been kicked so many times, it's hard to recognize it is a can anymore. They didn't actually solve anything at all. They just said, we're going to borrow more money on your wallet and spend it. Going to be off and doing that. Now, let's get back to Obamacare, because this is an issue I'm going to be bringing up with John McAfee when he joins us in the next hour. Apparently, somebody who was working on healthcare.gov left on the server some of the source code used to create the system, which was found, and it may be gone by now, but it was found and is circulating around out there in cyberspace. And apparently over at, listen to me talk about myself, WordPress, they're trying to locate one of the programmers whose name is Jeremy, because it appears in the comments on the coding. And I really don't care that much about Jeremy, but looking at the snippets of code that have surfaced, reveals a very poorly thought out design. And I'll give you one good example. For anybody who's done large-scale code development, the paths to various data directories are hard-coded in the code. Go to /root/data/ blah, blah, blah. And anybody who knows code development knows that in order to make your code portable, you use environmental variables for that, so that when the current computer system proves inadequate, as it is already doing, you can move the executable onto a new platform, change the environmental variables to change where the data directories are and be up and running. The way it's written now, if they need to move this system onto a new computer, they're going to have to go through and hand edit all the direct file pointers, recompile and reinstall. And it's a very, very sloppy way of running a large-scale programming system. Yet another scandal, and apparently this is inside the Beltway in their watchdog report. Apparently an Obamacare Navigator leader, who is part of an organization that received Navigator funding to help enroll people in Obamacare, turns out to be an illegal alien, who is not only an illegal alien, but is out there absolutely refuting that the government has any right to not allow him to stay in this country, no right to impose citizenship requirements. And these are the people that they were recruiting here. And apparently it's a her, Maria Marroquin, and apparently she was supposed to be in charge of the taxpayer-funded Obamacare recruitment offices for the New York organization, which is also a labor front group. This whole thing was recklessly put together. And the American people absolutely, absolutely are right to reject this thing. It's just a cash grab here. By the way, we put up a poll at whatreallyhappened.com. Should Obamacare be repealed? And it is currently running 93% saying yes, it should be repealed, and only 7% saying no, it should not be repealed. So the people are speaking on this one. Now, already, and again, they don't want you thinking about how this debt ceiling agreement didn't solve anything. They're just trying to convince you they just did something wonderful that you should love them for. And Marco Rubio has already gone back to introducing a resolution calling for increased sanctions on Iran, saying Tehran has broken its word far too many times to be trusted. This coming from a member of the United States Congress. Talk about the pot calling the kettle black. Now, I've been following the situation with Iran for quite some time. I don't know that they've broken their word. And if Marco wants to document it, he can. But he can't document it saying that Iran says one thing and we know something else, because that's just an allegation. That's not a fact. And so here we have the Congress that has raised the debt ceiling, and they're already going out to spend that new money making war on other countries instead of taking care of the American people. And we know who Marco Rubio is listening to. He's listening to Israel, because Israel's already out there saying, we've got to increase the sanctions. Don't pay no attention to what Iran is saying. We've got to crush them down. And one senior Israeli official said Iran should be tested by its actions, not its proposals. All right, I'm in favor of that. Let's judge Iran by what they do. And Iran has not invaded another country in a war of aggression in over 200 years. And that stands in stark contrast to the United States and Israel, which these days cannot go 6 months without bombing somebody. Now, George W. Bush is out there making public appearances saying, I don't trust Iran to change their intentions toward Israel. W, I hate to be the one to tell you this, but you might as well stop sucking up to Israel, because you're not allowed to run for president again. Now, the word coming out of the P5+1 talks, of course, is quite a bit different. European Foreign Policy Chief Catherine Ashton is saying the current round of talks are the most substantive ever. They're extensive and fruitful. They are making progress. And, of course, Israel and the U.S. are out there screaming, you will shut down all your nuclear industry before we even talk to you about lifting sanctions. And Iran is coming back the other way and saying, let's do it in a staged thing. We'll ship some of our enriched uranium out if you will agree to lift the sanctions. And the U.S. attitude is, no, You do what we tell you to do. You give us everything we want first, then maybe we'll do something nice for you. And, of course, that's a negotiating posture that's designed to derail the possibility of a deal. Because the real goal is invasion of Iran. And the real agenda is forcing Iran to sell their oil only for U.S. dollars, forcing Iran to accept private central banking, issuing the public currency as a loan at interest, propping up the petrodollar, propping up Bretton Woods, and forcing this private central banking scam on the entire world. And, of course, this agenda is backfiring because now Iran is applying to join the BRICS group in order to basically be able to ignore the U.S.-led sanctions. The world is breaking into two parts. Those nations still enslaved to the dollar and private central banking, and these growing organizations like BRICS and the Shanghai Cooperative Organization, which are saying, we know there's a better way to run the economy for the benefit of our nations and the nation's people, and that's what we're going to do. And as long as the United States continues this belligerent policy, they're driving nations away from U.S. influence and into the influence of other countries like Russia and China. So it's already, as a policy, this forcing the world back onto Bretton Woods, it's failing miserably. Now, you're probably aware of Glenn Greenwald, who is a reporter for the Guardian newspaper who has been at the spear point of Edward Snowden's revelations to the world about this absolutely illegal, unconstitutional NSA spying on law-abiding citizens. And apparently a tremendous amount of pressure has been put on the Guardian to shut him up. And as a result, Glenn Greenwald is leaving the Guardian newspaper, but he's starting up his own independent media project. He's been funded to the tune of $250 million by Pierre Omidyar. And I think Pierre, like a lot of other rich people, are realizing that unless they're the 1%, if they're like the 2%, sooner or later the government's going to be coming after them. The government's quit trying to loot the working class, the poor. There's nothing left there. So they're moving up the food chain. They're now starting to go after the middle class, what's left of the middle class, and the upper middle class. And I know one of the reasons that we hear so many people who do have a little bit of money, trying to portray those on food stamps as lazy or worthless, because it's a form of denying that the same thing could happen to them. But it's about to, unless they unite and take a stand against this creeping fascism that has crippled our country. So we're coming up on another commercial break. We're going to take a few minutes for some words. We're going to be back with what appears to be yet another attempt to regain the trust and loyalty of the American people, or at least back to the corporate media. We'll be right back. Hi, America. Welcome back to the show here. And if you're having trouble reaching the What Really Happened website, it appears to be under hacker attack right now, and we're trying to deal with that. Over at the corporate media, they're just dragging out anything they can so they don't have to talk about yesterday's debt ceiling deal in the Congress, because it actually did not solve any of the problems. It just put it off till next year, where hopefully there'll be something else going on that will keep your mind occupied. So what's they had OJ is out there, and there's been a school bus hijacking where the suspect is already surrendered, and they're just out there thrashing, trying to find things, and they're making a big deal about this new movie, Fifth Estate, that is attempting to resell the brand of Julian Assange and WikiLeaks as the go-to place for whistleblowers, because, as you're probably aware, WikiLeaks and Julian Assange have come under severe doubt of their legitimacy because of several things that they've done. First and foremost, that WikiLeaks has never exposed anything bad about Israel, and the way that he's been promoted as the go-to guy right from the start. I mean, 3 months after he registered the domain WikiLeaks, he was on the front page of Newsweek and Time. Yes, if you're a whistleblower, this is where you want to go. And we saw how well he protected Bradley Manning. He even tried to take credit for the ClimateGate leaks, when the information about the hide the decline and the computer code that was rigging the data to look like a hockey stick came out of the Hadley Climate Research Unit. It was out there 3 days on a lot of websites, including my own, and all of a sudden WikiLeaks tried to take credit for that. So they made a movie about him now to remind everybody that, yes, this is the guy you should go to and pay no attention to any of those other whistleblowing websites out there. Apparently in his speech to Congress, Barack Obama was out there saying it's time to ignore activists and bloggers and talking heads on radio, and I guess he means people like me. Because right now they're just trying as hard as they can to regain control over the minds of America. And another point Obama made in his speech, we have to work to regain the trust of the American people. Good luck on that one. I'll tell you right now, for the benefit of those White House people who are listening to my show right now, there is only one way to regain the trust of the American people. And that is to come clean on all the previous lies and say, yes, prior administrations lied to you, and we did in earlier years, but we're going to change the way we do business. But as long as you follow a policy of if at first you don't succeed, lie again, you will never, ever regain the trust of the American people, period, end of discussion. So Obama's up there saying, we've got to focus on what the majority of Americans sent us here to do. All right, fair enough. I'm all in favor of that. We, the people of the United States of America, elected all the Congress critters and you, Barack Obama, to make our lives better, not plunge us further into debt to private bankers when the Constitution allows you to issue a debt-free public currency. And as long as you continue to follow that scam and support that fraud, that is not what we, the American people, sent you to Washington to do. I mean, go back and look at all the promises Obama made in 2008. He was going to end the wars. In fact, I think I still have that here in the cart machine.
I will promise you this, that if we have not gotten our troops out by the time I am president, it is the first thing I will do. I will get our troops home. We will bring an end to this war. You can take that to the bank.
Well, obviously, we can't take that to the bank. Obama lies just as badly as any of his predecessors. And as long as they continue thinking that lying to the people is a legitimate tool of domestic statecraft, they're going to have a trust problem. I remember he said in an earlier quote saying, if you can't trust the government, we have a problem. Well, we have a problem. Mr. Obama and you and your cohorts in Sodom on the Potomac created that problem. If you find yourself struggling with a credibility crisis, it is of your own making. It's not like we out here in cyberspace just woke up one morning and said, I think I'm going to spend the next 20 years trying to bring down the government. It is your lies and deceptions and fraud and dirty dealing that made all of us. Anyway. Now, we saw, actually, I'm going to go ahead and take a phone call here before I get onto this next piece because it's rather long. Steve in Long Island. Aloha, Steve. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi. Hi, Mike.
Hi.
Aloha, Mike.
Aloha,
Aloha from Long Island.
Yes.
Yes. Actually, there's actually two topics I want to bring up. One is the moon landing, which Van Allen built. The second one is Roswell.
All right. Thank you very much. We're going to let you go. Okay. Inevitably, it happens. The furlough's over. The hired shills are back to make kooky phone calls to the talk radio shows. My goodness. All right, so moving on to this story. This was out in the Las Vegas Sun, and it's an article titled, Beware the Conspiracy Theorists. And it is an outright attack on Jesse Ventura, who has come out with a new book about the John F. Kennedy assassination, because we're coming up in just a little over a month. We're coming up on the 50th anniversary of that watershed event in American history. And we're already seeing a flood of new books saying, oh, yes, the Warren Commission was right. You shouldn't listen to those crazy people out there who doubt the official story. How can anybody doubt the official story of the United States government? How dare they? Harumph, harumph, harumph. And, my response to that is, do you believe Saddam Hussein actually had nuclear weapons? So they're out there already trying to basically ridicule anybody who doubts the official story, and that's all they've got left is ridicule. And we're seeing all this taxpayer-funded bovine poo being flung at us using a snowblower. a desperate attempt by a government to bolster the accumulated lies of previous administrations. Because once a government admits that, yeah, Roosevelt lied about Pearl Harbor being a surprise, and yeah, the Warren Report lied about Lee Harvey Oswald, and McKinley lied about Spanish mine in Havana Harbor, and Johnson lied about torpedoes in the Gulf of Tonkin, then all of a sudden the American people are saying, the government lies to us, so what are they telling us right now here today that we should not trust? Now, the reality is that the House Select Committee on Assassinations in 1976 concluded there were multiple shooters in Dealey Plaza, and therefore there was a conspiracy. Gerald Ford, who was on the Warren Commission, admitted changing the official location of John F. Kennedy's back wound, moving it up onto the shoulder to get it to line up with the magic bullet theory. Now, he explained it away by saying, well, it was clarification. We were clarifying. No. You don't clarify by actually falsifying the evidence in the medical records. And it goes on and on. Now, the good news is, looking at the comments, and I put a very nice comment in there myself, looking at the comments over at the Las Vegas Sun, it is obvious nobody is buying this attempt to bolster the official story ahead of the anniversary of the assassination. And we're seeing all these people who are out there whining and crying about how the blogs and the Internet are just making it impossible for us to do our jobs. We heard that from Jay Rockefeller. Oh, the Internet should never have been invented. We can't bamboozle these people anymore. Yeah, guess what? That's the new world. The ruling bodies went through the same thing when Gutenberg rediscovered movable type printing, and it's happening all over again. And you can whine and cry all you want. It's not going to go away. Anthony Weiner is out there saying he'd be mayor if the Internet didn't exist. No, Anthony, you'd be mayor if you weren't sending nude photos of yourself to women not your wife. And it betrays this idea, this mindset that it's okay to behave this way, and the problem is those who pointed out that you behave that way. Complete lack of personal responsibility. We're going to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. Hi, America. Welcome back to the show here, and our server is back up and responding the way it normally should do. Probably a lot of testing going on for when they need to silence that Internet so that Anthony Weiner can send naked pictures of his junk to women with impunity and not be called on it in front of the voters here. All righty, so let's talk about Afghanistan a little bit. Apparently, a deal has been reached for the United States to keep troops in Afghanistan after next year. And I know this is a tremendous disappointment for those of you who actually believed Obama back in 2008 when he said he was going to bring all the troops home, or later on when he said 2014. And the reason is they need to garrison Afghanistan for a couple of reasons. One, to potentially block Russian support of Iran for that war, and also they got to keep control of all those opium poppies. Because gosh darn that Taliban, they had absolutely shut down the production of all opium inside Afghanistan. We can't have that. So the U.S. invades Afghanistan, kick out the Taliban, install Hamid Karzai as the new El Presidente de Uno Cal, and the poppies are blooming, and there are bumper crops, and cheap heroin is flowing into the United States of America and also into Russia, which is not making them any friendly. The sticking point for troops staying in Afghanistan was one of immunity, where the U.S. forces in Afghanistan could pretty much do whatever they want, and the local Afghan authorities couldn't arrest them, couldn't prosecute them, couldn't throw them in jail. Now, they didn't get that part of the deal. So those troops in Afghanistan are going to have to obey the local laws. No beating up little children, no flinging puppies off of cliffs, no running over innocent people's cars in those Humvees, no raping the local girls. They're actually going to have to behave themselves here. Now, I think we mentioned this yesterday. Vladimir Putin is building a huge rail system to bypass the Suez Canal, which is under threat not only from nations in the Middle East during this upcoming war for oil, but from the United States itself, which could take control and sever that traffic route to disrupt oil supplies. So Putin is thinking long term. The Russians have a rich cultural history of playing chess, which teaches you to think long term and strategically. The U.S. government, they're poker players or heart players, which is all about bluffing and shooting the moon and just going for the moment. And so Putin is making some very carefully considered, well-thought-out decisions. Now, we're going to take a phone call here. Scott in Virginia. Aloha, Scott. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Mike. I have two things I wanted to bring up to you. The first, have you heard about those fake ceremonies in Hawaii where they were returning?
Yeah, and it's part of the propaganda to try and quell down this whole missing in action issue. And what they're really doing is covering up the fact that during the Vietnam War there was a major problem with desertion. That people just, we're not here, this is not a clean war, we're not doing anything useful. And they would flee over the border to places like Laos and Cambodia. And there was actually a story that was out there and then denied that the U.S. actually used sarin gas on this village that the deserters had built for themselves to live in. And so they have to go out and say, yes, we found the MIAs and we're bringing them back. And it turns out what's going on is they would have all the families down there and there'd be a cargo plane sitting on the runway and they'd bring out all these boxes and say, these are the remains of your loved ones, we're going to bury them, so stop harassing us about the MIA problem any longer. And it turned out the boxes were empty. The plane can't even fly. It's an old junker that they would literally tow out there. It's just all...
Mike,
yeah.
There's a great article in Stars and Stripes. If anyone wants to look this story up that you're talking about, they just go to Stars and Stripes or pull up on Google JPAC admits to phony ceremonies. That's the Joint Pacific Command out in Hawaii that gets these remains and does scientific studies on them to see, if they can find out who they are. But
or claim they know who they are.
Exactly. This is all branches of the service relying not only to the American people, but to their own service members. For the last 7 years, they've been conducting these phony ceremonies. People have been coming from all around the world, especially veterans.
Oh, I mean, the last thing the military high command needs for the rank and file to know is how bad a problem desertion really was. It was certainly withheld from the soldiers during Vietnam, even during World War II. Remember, when they were talking about the severe losses during the daylight bombing raids over Europe. And what was going on is some of these bomber crews would go through, do the bombing mission, get shot at, and on the way back they say, I'm not going to do another 25 of these things. And they would just agree en masse to fly the plane off into some neutral country, and they'd put it down there, and they'd just move into that country and resume, the rest of their lives there. And even today, every once in a while, when they're clearing forests for new housing developments, they'll find the remains of an old B-17 that was just set down there back during World War II. Desertion has been a huge problem. And the U.S. government does lie to its own people. I mean, my sources are telling me that this shooting at Fort Hood, that they're blaming this convenient Muslim guy, was actually a riot by soldiers who had just come back from the war zone, thought their tours of duty were over, they were going to get mustered out and go back to real life, and they were notified under stop loss, yes, we're sending you back one more time, and it just resulted in a riot. But the U.S. government doesn't want the military or the public to know just how they've pushed these kids to the breaking point, so they find a convenient Muslim and they frame him for the crime.
Mike, what you just said makes more sense than what the government told us, that a psychiatrist went crazy and shot up a whole bunch of his fellow servicemen. But here's the other thing I wanted to bring up, and this really gets me, Mike. I call it isn't real. I don't call it what everybody else calls it, because I feel like if I call it that, then I'm letting them win in a way every time I talk about them. Have you noticed that isn't real? Our loyal ally against terrorism in the world, kind of like our Robin. We're Batman, they're Robin. But for some reason, every time we get into a fight with Al-Qaeda, a.k.a. the toilet, wink, wink, nod, nod, Al-Qaeda never seems to attack isn't real. Never seems to get into a fight with isn't real.
You noticed that, did you?
And it's kind of like if you were a 6-year-old watching an episode of Batman and Robin, and they got into a fight with Joker, and none of Joker's thugs touched Robin. He just sat there, maybe just documenting the event, not helping Batman in any way. 6-year-old kids would say, "Hey, I think Robin might have something going on with the Joker, because the Joker never seems to attack him."
Well, it's the same comment I was making about Julian Assange and WikiLeaks. They were exposing stuff all over the place and trying to, promote themselves as the go-to place for whistleblowers, which, again, look what happened to Bradley Manning. And but WikiLeaks has never released anything embarrassing about Israel. Since WikiLeaks was created, Israel has been exposed as having nuclear weapons, trying to sell nuclear weapons to other countries. WikiLeaks never touched any of that stuff.
Or also known as isn't real. That's what my name is for it. I feel like every time people call it Israel, it's like that transition back in the 1800s when Native American Indians stopped being called Native American Indians and just started being called Indians, and the colonists were referred to as Americans.
Yeah.
And the Indians must have known that they lost the battle then. They were never going to get their dream back when the names of the parties changed in that regard. And I find every time we call them Israelis or we call them Israel, even if we're condemning their actions.
Well, I disagree. I hate to cut you off. We're coming up on a commercial break. I disagree. The reason I make a point of calling them Israelis is to distinguish them from the world's Jewish people, many of whom don't actually approve of what Israel's government is doing, and even the people of Israel don't agree with a lot of what Israel's government is doing. And I want to keep the focus that we're talking about the actions of a government, just a few individuals in a government, in order to avoid all of those Israel supporters who come out and say, oh, you just hate the Jewish people, you're an anti-Semite, and that's the only reason you're criticizing Israel. No, we criticize Israel not because of who they are or what they believe, but because of how they behave. And we need to keep that focus on there, because the world's Jewish people are not responsible for the crimes of Israel's government, just like the world's Muslims are not responsible for the crimes of Al-Qaeda, whoever that turns out to be, just like the vast majority of Americans need to stand up and say, we are not responsible for the crimes of Washington, D.C. and Wall Street. Okay?
Right. You know what? I wish I could call somebody anti-Protestant if I disagree with them. Or if they're a Protestant, I could call them a self-hating Protestant.
Oh, yeah. Hitler didn't do anything wrong. You're just criticizing the Nazis because you hate the German people. And it's nonsense. We got to take a break for commercials. Thank you for the call, and we'll be back with another phone call after these words from our sponsors. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And I want to go back and talk about Syria a little bit, because when we talk about very obvious and blatant lies by the U.S. government to trick you into obedience, to trick you into agreeing to actions you otherwise would oppose, Syria is one of the most egregious recent examples out there. The official U.S. government story was that Syria's Bashar al-Assad carried out a chemical weapon attack on women and children of his own Alawite supporters virtually in front of UN chemical weapons inspectors on the very day they arrived. And that was the reason we had to invade Syria. And remember my advice, if you're trying to find out the truth of what's going on, look for what should be there and is not. And what was missing from this lie was a reason for Assad to do something that incredibly stupid. This attack achieved no military objective. It certainly was bad for him politically. He simply wouldn't do something that stupid. Now, world leaders may be many things. Narcissistic, sociopathic egomaniacs, look at our own leader as a good example of that. But they are not stupid. They do not rise to the top of their particular manure pile of politics by being idiots. Now, recently, a lot of people were still grousing over the fact that the Nobel Peace Prize, instead of going to Vladimir Putin, who really did yank the rug out of the invasion of Syria, it went to the Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons. Okay, now, the Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons may have just redeemed themselves a little tiny bit from that criticism, because they've now gone public saying that, in point of fact, the Syrian government is cooperating fully in providing access to chemical weapons under its control. They went to the rebels and said, we need to do the same here, and the rebels are basically saying no. And we know the rebels do have chemical weapons. They were caught with sarin by the Turkish government. And it's just a reminder that this entire claim that, it had to be Assad because the rebels don't have chemical weapons, it was just more of this USDA choice bovine excrement being flung at you by this government, which cannot seem to really get their head around the fact that the days when they could just say anything they wanted to the American people and be believed are gone forever. They are still trying to run the United States of America as it worked back at the height of the Cold War in the 1950s and the 1960s, where the government would come up with a fib, the corporate media would feed it to you, and the American people would say, yes, sir, and throw their money and their babies on the designated enemy's bayonets. Anyway, all right, we got a couple of phone calls here before the top of the hour. Owen in California. Aloha. Owen, welcome to the show. What's on your mind? Owen, there you are.
Yeah, I have a question regarding the recent, I'll divide it into two parts, the recent developments we've discovered. The D-Link routers, Cisco's routers, are penetratable. Mm-hmm. I know that you're trying to come out with a new product that will be quasi-NSA proof. There's probably no such thing. Eventually everybody breaks. And you might comment a little on the origin of the Tor browser developed by the United States Navy intelligence services that we think might be safe. For some of us who don't try and shop for drugs or to look at pictures of 16-year-old Filipino women, we're more interested in credit card security and so forth. And then thirdly, to tie into some of the internet stories, there's a lot of rumor that you were working for one of the intelligence services that may have started with the letter C, finished with the letter A, has a vowel in between, in Central America. Could you address some of those rumors and let us know if you're going to make a new Tor browser for us?
I'm not making
Central America.
I'm not making a new Tor browser for you. I'm not making a new Tor browser for anybody. The only work I've done in that area is for my NSA challenges, and I just released the source code on that for people to play with as they will. The D-Link router compromise most likely is a backdoor that was built into these routers because it covers several model numbers. So it's designed in. It's not just an accident. And it's probably an NSA backdoor. And the problem is the cyber criminals are, in fact, finding those backdoors and exploiting them for criminal purposes. Far from making the American public safer with all this spying, the NSA has actually made us more wide open to those with bad intent. Now, as far as Tor is concerned, there's actually been information that it was being compromised long ago, and Edward Snowden said exactly the same thing. Anytime there is a publicly available solution to your security, you can pretty much guarantee it's already been backdoored or bypassed by the NSA. And that's why I keep saying only real criminals and real terrorists who have the resources to develop their own private encryption methods, they're invisible to the NSA. All of this NSA spying is targeting you, the law-abiding American citizen, to make sure you're not thinking bad thoughts about the government and the bankers, and to steal business secrets, which, of course, has resulted in a tremendous outcry from places like Brazil, Europe. They're now moving to develop private nets. Some countries are actually literally going back to typewriter and paper for their internal government communications. It's a huge, huge backlash, and all of it is illegal and unconstitutional. All righty, let's see. Grab another phone call here. John in Wyoming. Aloha, John. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Michael. How are you today?
I'm doing okay.
Aloha. It's good. We have to laugh once in a while to break through all this stuff.
Yes.
Quick question. When you did the interview with Jim Trafficant,
yes,
I missed that, and I caught it the next day and everything. But there was something he said that I was sitting there going, I wonder what Michael's thinking while he's talking about Romney. I love Jim Trafficant. He's one of the guys back 11, 12, 14 years. He was the only guy that when I turned on C-SPAN and he talked, I said, I love the rest of them, you can, whatever. Mm-hmm. But Ron Paul was running, and he was sabotaged every twist and turn in the road because he was trying to restore things the way you're talking about.
Yes.
And when he didn't bring up Ron Paul and say, at least that, and he was talking about Romney could have won, I was like, whoa, what's going on here? You're talking about Gecko. He destroys companies, mm-hmm. breaks them all down. He's not for America. He's just as bad as anybody else. What's going on here?
Well, obviously, I don't expect anybody, certainly not my guest, to be 100% in agreement with what I have to say here. And obviously, once Ron Paul was obviously going to be out of the race, we had to once again pick the lesser of two evils, which is a stupid way to run a country. Obviously, Traficant thought that Romney was going to have advantages over Obama. Obviously, I felt the other way. The nation got screwed. It didn't really matter who got elected. Because that president and the Congress, they're just out there on stage acting like they're the government, but the people really pulling the strings are back there at the Federal Reserve and Wall Street and the IMF.
So Jim's still okay. It's just that, and I'm glad you brought it up that way, because maybe at that time he was thinking the same thing you just said, that Ron was out.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I was waiting for him to say, "Are you kidding me?" Both of them. They did one flip side of the coin. Come on, Ron Paul was the only real guy that at least presented something that was real, because he's been saying the same thing for so long, and we would have had a really good time with him in office.
Well, I absolutely agree, but remember, at the point where the media was saying Romney might win, Ron Paul was already out, and I think that's what Jim meant. I have to let you go. I'm going to try and squeeze one more phone call in before the top of the hour. So, Brian in Canada. Aloha, Brian. What's on your mind?
Yeah, hey, just going back to a couple of callers ago when you were talking about those ceremonies they were holding for the MIAs in Vietnam. You remember when, the guy that came out and he said the burial of Osama at sea was in that whole episode where they supposedly shot him and took him, buried him at sea, was a complete
Seymour
fabrication.
Hersh. Seymour Hersh. Yeah.
And I've been kind of sitting back thinking, God, can that be really true? I mean, would they go that far to fake?
Yeah, they would. Of course they would. They have historically. They've gone to extreme lengths to try and fake. Remember, at the time, Romney was being declared ahead in the presidential race, and Obama needed a publicity stunt to look presidential. We know the real Osama bin Laden died back in 2001 of natural causes. So they went out, said, we got bin Laden. They flooded the net with these very badly done, phony photographs that were instantly discredited by a certain blacklisted visual effects supervisor living in Hawaii. And then they stopped and said, we're not going to release any more pictures. We got him. That's it, all you're supposed to believe. And the whole thing fizzled out. Now, Obama still won because Romney did, in fact, self-destruct toward the end there. Anyway, we have to let you go. We got to take a break for Phyllis Schlafly commercials. When we come back, we're going to have John McAfee on the air. We're going to be going to town on the NSA. We're going to be going to town on the poor quality software development of the Obamacare system and various other and sundry issues. So we will be right back after Phyllis Schlafly commercials. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 3. And joining us on the line now is legendary entrepreneur and software guru John McAfee. And, John, I can't tell you what a treat this is to have you on the show here, because not too long ago you put out this amazingly funny video on the correct way to remove McAfee antivirus from your computers. And I got to tell you, I love a guy who doesn't take himself seriously.
Well, thank you, Michael. I'm very happy to be on your show today.
I wanted you on the show really to talk about a couple more serious topics, and obviously that would be the NSA's intrusion into our lives, your upcoming project to try and protect people from that kind of intrusion and spying, and then, of course, going on to the very obvious slipshod, poor-quality programming behind the Obamacare software system. In fact, the news is just now announcing they're going to pour millions of dollars into the system to deal with the problems, and I'm sure you and I both know from software development past that adding manpower and money to a late software development project is just going to make it even later. So that's not going to turn out well. But tell us what you know about what's going on with the NSA and how you think we should be protecting our business secrets from a government which can't be trusted with them.
Well, it's not just the NSA. The NSA is just the spotlight of the hour. Imagine the CIA, the FBI, other covert government agencies have just as much power, and you know for a fact that they have been doing the same thing. So I think it's an endemic problem throughout the entire government. And we've just become lazy as Americans, and we've allowed this to happen. If you think that Benjamin Franklin and then George Washington would tolerate anything remotely resembling this, of course they wouldn't. So what we can do is, you can take political action, you can get brave and speak out, or you can use the technology that they use to protect yourself from their prying eyes.
Well, one of the points that I've made many times when I was living up in Seattle, Washington, there was a huge scandal there involving the Asia-Pacific Economic Conference, where agents of the FBI and CIA were breaking into the computers of conference attendees not to have anything to deal with fighting crime or fighting terror, but they were literally stealing business secrets, bidding proposals and plans to give to political cronies. And based on that, and all of these FBI agents who've been arrested for insider trading based on looting business secrets from computers, is why I tell everybody you cannot and should not trust this government with your business secrets at all. And yes, as you say, John, we have to take responsibility for guarding our data against a government that is proven untrustworthy.
Well, I mean, absolutely. And I mean, what you just stated about the behavior of supposedly an honorable arm of the government, well, it's just astonishing beyond belief. I mean, this is decadence to the extreme. But there are people out there that in the security field who are doing the best they can to put shields around each other. I'm one of those people. I'm developing my own product to make this, if not impossible, certainly extremely difficult for the government to pry into places where they shouldn't be prying. And what you do in the privacy of your home, the secrets that you have with your wife, your children, your business associates, we all have a right to that, surely. And when that's violated, what's left? I mean, what is humanity without privacy?
Well, one of the points that we've made over at our website is that while the government likes to claim that all of this spying on law-abiding citizens is necessary to fight crime and terror, we've already proven, you know where I'm going, don't you? We've already proven that real criminals and real terrorists with the resources to develop their own encryption methodologies are going to be able to evade the NSA. We actually wrote and published 3 NSA challenges at my website showing how easy it is to come up with codes and encryptions. And I'm not an expert on this stuff either, but you can come up with systems that will secure your data transmission from the NSA, which is really all about watching the American people to make sure we're not thinking those bad thoughts and stealing, looting business secrets. So, like I said, I want to talk, what is this product that you have coming out that is going to help Americans keep their secrets private?
Well, it's basically a hardware device which adds another layer of security to the Internet. The hardware devices have no fixed ID. The files that are transferred are all encrypted, and you never know who the file came from, and the person sending it never knows who it's going to. In fact, you don't even know what's happening. The box takes care of everything. You wake up in the morning and maybe you're looking for a specific photograph or a piece of information, so you put it into the system, and it searches the available database and just gives it to you. No one knows where it came from. No one knows who asked for it.
Okay, so basically it's just a giant storage facility with information saved on it without any identifying factors, so the information can just go back and forth on that. And obviously, if I pre-encrypt a file myself on my local machine and then send it into the system, then there's that added level of security.
Absolutely, and we have an encryption technology that the NSA was not involved with. That's another idiocy that our industry engaged in. They asked the NSA to help them develop encryption technology. Now, what madness is that? So that if they help develop it, then they can get into it, obviously. So we're not taking that tack.
Well, I remember back in the 1980s, there was a lot of publicly available information on encryption technology, and then all of a sudden it started to go away. And there is apparently a law saying that any research done into cryptography has to be approved by the NSA prior to publication. So they've already got a little gateway set up there to limit what is available to the public in terms of codes and encryptions. But again, knowing that reading a message involves a 2-step process of determining the method, then finding the key, determining the method is obviously the hard part, and that is why real criminals and real terrorists, they're going to evade the NSA. The NSA tried to claim they stopped something like 57 terror attacks. Now they've admitted, no, they didn't actually do that. Alexander is now going to step down because of that embarrassing lie. It really is all about watching the American people, and all of it a violation of the 4th Amendment to the Constitution. The government has
Absolutely, sir.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So the government has no business going into your files or your home unless they know there is a crime taking place supported by oath or affirmation. There has to be an accusation. It has to be supported by either a witness or some kind of proof. Otherwise, the government can't come in there. Now, the government's spin, of course, obviously, is that it's not a Fourth Amendment violation to collect the data, until they look at it, which to me sounds like a burglar coming into your home and stealing your jewelry and saying it's not really a crime until I trade it for drugs. And, of course, that's complete and utter nonsense.
Yeah, so we've developed an insane government, and it's time we all woke up and took a look. We've got to do something. We do.
We absolutely do. We're coming up on a commercial break. When we come back from that commercial break, I think you've probably been following this absolute unmitigated disaster for this Obamacare computer system. We're actually getting somebody calling in. When will this NSA system of yours be available, and where can they get it?
It will be available. The prototype will be finished in 6 months. The product will be available in a year, and you'll be able to everywhere, I hope.
Okay, well, your phone line is breaking up, and hopefully we'll get a clean connection coming in for the next 7. You can stay with us till the bottom of the hour, correct? John, are you going to be able to stay with us to the bottom of the hour?
Yes, I will.
All right, thank you very much there. All righty, so we're coming up on a commercial break, and when we come back, we're going to be talking with John McAfee, very colorful gentleman. If you haven't seen his video, it's on the front page of whatreallyhappened.com, and I admire a man who doesn't take himself seriously, and so it's great fun to watch. But the topic of discussion is very serious. NSA, how to protect yourself from all government agencies that are stealing your business secrets to personally profit from, and you do have to take responsibility for your own data. So we're going to take a break for commercials. We'll be back with John McAfee after 3 minutes. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're talking with legendary entrepreneur John McAfee, and just to clarify, John McAfee did sell the McAfee antivirus company 15 years ago, and so whatever's going on with it, he's disconnected from. That's why he did that amazingly funny video. But obviously, John, you're an expert on software development, and I don't mean to put you on the spot here, but right now we're seeing this firestorm of criticism over this horribly botched-up computer system. 3 years in development, $600 million, and now they're having to throw millions more into it behind Obamacare enrollment, and something like only less than 1%, some are saying even less than half of 1% of the people who actually log on to it succeed in enrolling in the health care plan. As somebody who's familiar with user interfaces and getting these things to work, I mean, what is your opinion of the software, quality of software work behind this whole system?
Well, I'm actually very familiar with the quality of the software. The system was designed for the lowest common denominator of a programmer. CGI has 10,000 programmers in India that program in a very low-level code. Well, it requires 3 to 4 months of training to be able to actually do the code. And they put the bulk of the system in those hands. And I'm not belittling Indian programmers. They're quite competent. However, no one would design a system this way. It's insane. In fact, I was actually contacted by Sean Hayes, who's the counsel for the House Committee of Energy and Commerce that oversees this program. Asked if I would come to Washington to talk to them, maybe give them my take on it. I said yes. They then wrote back that we don't have any money. We don't, we're in a state of chaos. No, seriously, we were in a state of chaos here. I said, okay, I'll put my own bill. And then 2 days later said, well, can we do it on the phone because we can't coordinate everybody. Now, what sort of government is this? Think about it.
Well, it's a government that's covering its own gluteus maximus at this point. Now, I don't know if you've heard this yet or not, but apparently examples of the source code were found on the healthcare.gov server, and people were able to basically copy it off. And just coming from my obviously considerably smaller experience in software development than you, looking at it, I'm seeing all kinds of indicators of a very poor design concept. I'm seeing hardwiring of directory location paths instead of using environmental variables, which means it's not portable. And
even misspellings, by the way.
Yeah, there's a lot of...
I'm counting one of the misspelling. Well, I actually have copies of communications from these programmers that CGI hired, asking for help from the general public about issues that, a first-level programmer could solve simply. This is a travesty of the highest order. And, again, I do not know who managed this program, but they need to be relieved of office immediately. What they need is, I don't think you can fix it. I really don't. If you start with a specific architecture and build on that, it's like saying, okay, we need to take the foundation out from under this building and put a new one in. You can't do it. It is not possible. However, I think 10 or 12 really good programmers and an excellent manager could pull this thing off in less than a year and less than $5 million. They will not, of course, do that because that's the sensible thing to do, and that's uncharacteristic for the government.
Oh, if they started doing the sensible thing here, the terrorists are going to win. And I'm in agreement with you, absolutely. Again, coming from my limited experience in software development, including large-scale systems, one of the major issues appears to be if you go out to like a Google or a Facebook, or let me go back. You go to eBay or you go to Amazon.com, you're presented with what they want to sell you and its price first, and then you make the choice of going into signing up. But apparently very late in the development cycle, the decision was made to force everybody to sign up first and provide all their private information before they even got to look at the Obamacare-compliant health insurance. And this, of course, created a huge bottleneck because everybody was trying to fill out all this information. Apparently the databases are not robust because the information, certainly here in Hawaii, when they opened the local exchange, the health insurance companies weren't getting any of the information coming through the system, so they literally had to blank the data disks and relaunch it here in Hawaii. That's how messed up it is.
It's a travesty, and the architecture requires that a huge amount of the processing be done on your local computer. It makes the programming very easy, but it makes the processing impossible. That's why, the government complained and said, well, it broke because we had 8 million users in the first week. Do you know that Google has something like 9 billion users per week in the same period of time? They don't break down.
No, and when you type in your search request to Google, you don't get a message coming back saying we'll give you your search results next February.
Absolutely not. And to be frank with you, Google spent less money on their software development than the administration did on the software for Obamacare. I mean, this is mind-boggling.
Now, somebody got very, very rich off this system, and what is really boggling my mind very heavily is that Obama is still pushing for this to move forward, even though it is obviously at least a year away from being operational. And again, they're going to throw more and more millions of dollars into trying to fix the problems. But I'm in agreement with you. The foundation it's built on is deeply flawed. They've made a lot of strategic mistakes, especially with the way it's not a portable code system. They can't move it to a larger computer to try and reduce the bottleneck. They can't distribute it the way it's currently written. Anyway, listen, we're coming to the bottom of the hour, and I want to thank you again. I know you're a very, very busy individual, and you've got a lot of stuff going on. But before I let you go, what websites would you like our listeners to visit? Where can they keep an eye on the progress of this NSA defeating technology that you are now developing?
The website is whoismcafee.com. Whoismcafee.com. And I'd like to leave you, Michael, with this one question. Nobody has asked why the $600 million went to a Canadian company, CGI, instead of an American company. And with that, I shall bid you adieu.
All right. Well, thank you very much, and thank you for spending time with us today. That was John McAfee, and he's an incredible individual. He's controversial, but obviously, again, looking at that funny video that he did about how to remove McAfee antivirus from your laptop, he's a guy who doesn't take himself seriously despite his fame and fortune. And the rest of it. I know we're all looking forward. I'm already getting emails. This is going to be a very popular product. I'm getting emails from people who are bemoaning the fact that it's 6 months to a year away. But again, given what we're seeing with this rush to software on Obamacare, I would rather have John and his people make sure this thing is really going to work before they launch. And it certainly stands in stark contrast to the current state of American software development, where they just throw it out on the market, rely on you to find the problems so that they can fix it with patches and upgrades. And that is such a hit on American productivity. So, again, his website is whoismcafee, and we're going to be keeping an eye on that project. Just caught out of the corner of my eye where Obama is really letting his ego get the better of him, because he's out there screaming at the GOP that if they don't like his policy, they should go out and win the election themselves. Now, of course, they already won election. That's why they're in the Congress. And remember, under the Constitution, Congress makes the laws and sets the policy. The president can say yes or no. But the president does not get to impose his policy on the Congress. And so he's getting defensive. And again, he's raising on a busted flush, because the Obamacare software system is a complete joke. Americans are turning away from this whole idea, and the harder Obama pushes to move this forward to get that expected $200 billion in tax revenues to dangle before lenders, the more and more it is going to cripple his agenda for his remaining term in office. All right, we're going to take a break for commercials. We'll be back with more news stories after these words from our sponsors. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And to recap something I mentioned to John during the interview, the head of the NSA and his deputy have announced they will step down from the agency at the beginning of next year. And that's probably the delay, is to sort of delink it from the fact that Keith Alexander got caught lying to Congress. I love that part about how Congress was going to have John McAfee over there to provide information on just how and why this software system for Obamacare turned into the disaster that it actually is in. And then they call back and say, we don't have the money, and he says, I'll pay for the ticket, and they call back and say, we can't schedule you. They don't want anybody in there who's going to actually tell them the truth about what's going on. They just want people who will come in there and provide what is politely called decision support. In other words, yes, the government did the right thing, even though it turned out to be a disaster. Yes, they were right to follow that path. We're going to grab a phone call here. BJ in Arizona, aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. Well, not very good. Sitting here with angry tears listening to you two discuss this. And it looks to me like $600 million got scraped off somewhere.
Oh, I agree. I agree. This system should never have cost this much to develop. They spent 3 years on this thing. Yeah, somebody got rich.
You know, all these things when they want to study Chinese hookers drinking and, you know, this solar company and that, I think they are all like cover shells just to hand money to people. Just to steal.
Very much so, and again, a lot of the people getting the money, they're either political supporters or they're clandestine assets for various intelligence agencies, and this is just another way of giving them money to go out and look like they're doing something important, you know, while they're actually involved in something else. But yeah, it is absolutely obscene, and again, you know, John is the expert on software development, but I've done software development myself. It's a necessary part. Well, you know, I began in computer animation and visual effects back at Robert Abel and Associates in the early 1980s, where you wrote your own rendering code or you went without. You couldn't just go down and buy a 3D Studio, a 3ds Max or Maya and just bring it home and start animating. We had to write our own code, and we had to develop these large systems that were portable, distributed, and I actually do think I'm a very good coder, and I think I proved it a little bit with my NSA challenges. But yeah, it's a typical U.S. government project, heavily bloated, very expensive, and really not doing very well, and it seems to be an artifact of U.S. government spending. And again, we look back at the F-22, which is still asphyxiating its pilots, the F-35, which cost more than the gross domestic product of Australia to develop and deploy, and it still doesn't work correctly. And by the way, the latest word on that one is, remember I've been telling you about how the helmet fire control system, they can't get it to work. They have just subcontracted it out to a company in Israel to try and get this thing working. So it's just vast sums of money, and it goes out for very, very little in return, and it's just obscene to see.
Well, the other thing that hurt is how many IT guys are sitting at home right now, unemployed, and to have this slap in the face, and then to have it turn out like it has, and to know the money was spent. I think I'm crying angry tears. Well,
no, I'm angry too. I mean, you're right. There's a lot of programmers out of work. Even though I'm not in the computer animation business anymore, I'm still getting resumes every day from people who've been let go from American shops, and they don't want to move to another country, and they're scrambling. It is absolutely insane for this 3 years, and they're now saying it cost $600 million, and now they're having to pour millions of dollars more into it. And John McAfee is absolutely right. This is all built on a foundation. They did not have a good system architecture to begin with. They didn't enforce standards. They just
I can't believe the Canadians would be that bad at it. Well, I don't know, what the word is, sadist, masochist, but why do I keep listening? That's what I want to know.
Because
why do I keep doing this to myself? Because I know what
we tell jokes every once in a while to keep things light and fluffy.
Well, you do. You're great. I love listening to you.
All right.
But I just had to get that one off. Okay, thanks a lot.
All right, you're welcome. I agree with the anger. I mean, at a time when America's technological segment of our society is struggling to find work. This programmer's working at the fast food restaurants, and they hand $600 million away. And again, as John said, we don't want to diss the programmers working in India, but if this is a U.S. government program, should the funds not go to the United States citizens first and foremost? And it shows a complete lack of respect. And BJ's right, it was a slap in the face to everybody in the United States who went to college to learn computer programming, got heavily into debt on these student loans because they were told when you come out with a degree in programming, there will be jobs waiting for you, and no, they're just not there. Fred in Michigan. Aloha, Fred. Welcome to the show. What is on your mind?
Brother Mike, I recall distinctly exactly that. I was in programming and realized I didn't have a programming mathematical brain, so I found out, but man, I tell you, the people that followed through on that, I was just totally amazed with. And you're right, they're flipping hamburgers now, but we need to know who's culpable in this programming debacle. We need to hold these scoundrels accountable. I mean, there's
well, it's whoever in the government who was pushing Obamacare, whoever handed out these contracts and then failed to exercise oversight. Obviously, the Department of Health and Human Services handed out all this money, and they weren't keeping an eye on it. A month ago, the programmers who were in charge of this system were telling the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, this is not ready to launch. And the Obama White House came down and said, you will launch by golly right now because we need to be able to prove to potential lenders that we have an additional $200 billion a year in tax revenue coming in from this windfall profits that the health insurance companies are going to be getting. And that's why they keep pushing it. And I think the vast majority of American people understand that Obama is coming out of a position of just another cash grab of the American people, and he's listening to his ego about
and look
this.
Mike, look at the electronics outsourcing for. Is this true on the fighter jets and even the domestic airliners? Hasn't there been a lot of outsourcing on electronics?
There has been. In fact, Boeing is saying that's the reason the Dreamliner is having so many problems. Is they contracted out to very inexpensive low bidders in other countries. And I don't mean to diss these other people, but when you're dealing with companies on the other side of the planet and you are not making a point of keeping careful watch, money junkies are money junkies everywhere. They're going to cut corners. I mean, the Dreamliner just had an entire fuselage panel come off in mid-flight. And America's reputation for producing quality products, whether they're cars or airliners or computer systems, it is in major, major decline right now.
It's like Michael Chusodowski. I don't know if you ever saw his presentation, War and Globalization. Hey, that pretty much sums it up. And then back in 2002, I saw this Hemp and the Rule of Law, Mike, and in there they show Henry Ford in the vicinity of a Cadillac-sized hemp plastic car that two NFL-sized dudes were trying to demolish with full-size sledgehammers. And were unable to do so. No chips, no dents, no cracks. And he was using hemp oil as the fuel source. So why can't we go back to the future and do all that?
Well, because large corporate profitability rests on having complete control of a particular material or a particular asset in order to charge high prices to use it. I mean, the guy who invented the diesel engine actually designed it to work on vegetable oil. And but going into World War, I think it was one of the World Wars, one of the big mistakes, the British government decided to contract with a Rothschild-owned refinery for a specially processed diesel fuel, even though they didn't need it. That was part of the Rothschild deal to finance the war. And the inventor of the diesel engine was trying to go over to the British government and say, look, you don't need to do this. It's designed to run on waste oil products. And he met with a very strange and suspicious death. There are a lot of technologies out there which could be distributed across society and take care of our energy needs, but we live in a world of corporate monopoly. I mean, Monsanto is trying to do that with our food, with their GMO seeds. And I think Monsanto knew full well these pollens were going to spread across and contaminate the natural varieties, so that from now on into the future, anybody who wants to grow food has to go to Monsanto to get their seeds. And it's just another way of taking what's in nature and corralling it off for corporate profitability.
I hear you, brother. That happened to Percy Schmeitzer, the canola farm, the organic canola farmer up in, I don't know where it was, Manitoba or wherever, and Monsanto bought a huge tract of land upwind, so naturally the GMO pollen spread downwind on the Schmeitzer's property. His thing is called Bioneers, B-I-O, Bioneers. So Percy Schmeitzer spent a whole decade exhausting, his
and
wealth.
he ultimately lost anyway. We got to take a break for commercials. Thank you for the call, Fred. Back with another phone call after these words from our sponsors. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're going to take one more phone call. Ralph in California. Aloha, Ralph. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Michael. It's Ralph again. Just calling. There was a lady there. I guess you guys are talking about people out of work, programming and all that.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things I'm going to show, my boy's 13. And I'm an installer, so and I like doing projects and little gadgets and whatever. It has to do with energy sources, solar power, try to generate my own, whenever I get a chance. So to show the boy. But two things I'm going to do my job when he hits 18. He's going to have a freaking clue of something.
Mm-hmm.
Like me when I graduated, and I didn't know where to go, so I just went to community college. At least I knew I was going to go to some type of college. But anyways, he's going to learn a trade and get his education. Sure.
No.
You just get an education, fine. All right. But you need to learn a trade to fall back on no matter what. And if you have both, then you can be a field engineer, whatever you do. But that's what my goal is for anybody, especially in the economy we have now.
Well, common sense tells you the more you know how to do, the more resilient you are, as the economy changes around you. And, I remember many, many years ago when I was just getting into, I was still in college at Cal State Fullerton. And, I was having discussions with my fellow students who all dreamed of growing up to become movie stars and working in the movie industry. And I said, you should have another skill you can pay the bills on if you're not actually getting, acting jobs, because I think it's something like single-digit % of Screen Actors Guild members actually make their living in the film industry. And I remember the attitude I got is, no, I'm going to be a big star. I don't need to have any other skills. And you find those people eventually homeless on the streets of Hollywood, which is really doubly cruel because there isn't a lot of film production left in Hollywood anymore. It's all being done in other countries. But the more you know, the more you can do. And college was sold as almost a sign of social status, that you should go to college just to prove that you were a better person. And a lot of the trades that really are necessary to keep our society going, electrician, plumbing, and so forth, really were de-emphasized. And young people were actually taught to sort of look like, if I have to be a plumber or an electrician or a baker or something, that somehow I'm not all that I should be. And that's absolute nonsense, because these are all foundational elements for our modern society. And one of the things I've been talking about when I talk about the failings of Wall Street is that for an economy to be healthy, money has to flow at all levels of society into all sectors, all jobs, and all investment categories to keep the system going. And when you have an economy that is totally focused on bank speculation, and investment into other areas dries up, support for education into these other areas dries up. There's plenty of money for people who want to go to college and study to be part of the financial and banking system, but other areas are just being neglected, and that's an economy that is definitely on its way out, which is what we're seeing now.
I agree, yeah, because, when I went to college, I was like, I'm going to get my fancy pay and graduate. Who wants to get dirty?
Well, you know, the funny thing is, in my life and my career, everything that I've done wasn't even being taught in college when I went there. In fact, I got kicked out. Well, I didn't get kicked out. I left Cal State Fullerton because in one of the courses in theater, the term paper, I said, we live in an age where computers are going to change theater. They're going to control the lights and the sound and the fly, and one day we're going to see computers put pictures right on motion picture film and TV videotape. And, of course, this was a long time ago, and that term paper got marked with an F because I didn't have footnotes for those allegations. I said, there are no footnotes. I am telling you this is where we're going. And because of that disruption, I left Cal State Fullerton and I took that term paper over to CBS Television City, and I got hired to design computer systems for game show scoreboards. So higher education, I think, is a little overrated, unless you go to one of the prestige schools where the ruling class is selected from.
Of course. Real quick about those EBTs.
Yeah.
Car fiasco. It just shows you the sad case of our society. Because if we had a healthy economy, EBTs we wouldn't be having that conversation. People would just be, they would have means to go ahead and take care of themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And
well, right now,
the desperation of the people because of the way the economy and how, depending on how the poor, I don't know what the percentage is. There's 50 million people, and how many out of that 50 million people are so used to being dependent on the government versus now the new influx of people that lost their job. You know, it just shows you the health of our economy. And
there's another mechanism. There's another mechanism at work, and that is, and this is the reason they're openly advertising for people to come onto food stamps, because if you're dependent on that EBT card, you will stay silent no matter what the government does wrong. Dependency means slavery. I mean, that's why we celebrate July 4th as Independence Day, not Freedom Day or We Kicked the British Butt Day. It's the day when we were allowed to become independent, not be forced to go to the Bank of England for our currency, not be forced to buy all of our products from the British East India Company. And we're back in that same situation where the government wants everybody somehow dependent on the government's generosity. They take our money away, and then they'll give it back as long as we do what they tell us to do. That's part of the enslavement mechanism. And I think the lesson of this EBT screw-up this last week and the threats to cut off EBT in Section 8 if the debt ceiling deal had not passed yesterday is a reminder to everybody that you should not be dependent on this federal government because it is proven to be undependable.
Thank you again, Mike. How do you retain all this information?
Coffee. Lots and lots of coffee. All right, thanks. Ralph, we're going to let you go here. We're going to finish up the show here and get out of here and get something useful done with the rest of the day. And I'm going to go back to that question. This is the question. And now that they have kicked the can down the road until the first part of next year about the debt ceiling, we now have all these months with which to get this message out to the American people. The Constitution authorizes the government to issue a debt-free, interest-free public currency to support commerce. That's the way this nation was started. Why is this government borrowing the currency at interest from a privately owned central bank? And that's the question every American ought to be asking right now. It's the question the federal government does not want you to be asking or thinking about. And certainly you will never see this question asked on the corporate media because it doesn't make any sense at all. We fought a revolution to be free of this kind of predatory banking, only to be sold back into this banker slavery not once but 3 times, with the first and second banks of the United States of America and then the Federal Reserve. And all 3 of these institutions enriched the bankers and brought the nation to the edge of collapse. Now, Congress had the stones to refuse to renew the charter for the first Bank of the United States. They were threatened with a war, which they got in the War of 1812, which even though the U.S. won it, they were forced to recharter a new private central bank to cover some of those debts, which was the second Bank of the United States, which Andrew Jackson shut down, whereupon there was an immediate assassination attempt on his life. And then 100 years ago this year, we got the Federal Reserve. And they called it the Federal Reserve because they knew if they called it the third Bank of the United States, people would be onto the scam. But it's no more federal than Federal Express. It is a privately owned central bank with pretensions of being part of the government. but it isn't. We have Alan Greenspan on video saying the Federal Reserve is answerable to no federal government authority. They see themselves as the rulers and pillagers and looters of this nation. So, when you talk to your friends about the debt ceiling, just ask, why is there a debt ceiling at all? The Constitution allows the government to create and issue interest-free currency. Why is this government borrowing currency at interest from a privately owned central bank? And we've got now, what, two and a half months to get this question before the eyes of every single American before they come back for another debt ceiling crisis and, oh, what will we do? Well, let's do what Andrew Jackson did. Rescind the charter, shut it down, and go back to the economic system that made this country great in the first place. There's the music. It's time for us to get on out of here. And I'm going to close with one more request, and I know a lot of you have already done this, and thank you very much for your support. But please go over to Republic Broadcasting, hit that donate button, or go over to Republic Trading Group, buy your physical silver and gold from them, because a portion of the proceeds from those sales goes to support our network. We don't get big checks with lots of zeros in them from Monsanto or Dow Chemical or General Dynamics. They don't even return our phone calls. We are the People's Radio Network. You are the people, and we survive only as long as you are willing to support our operation. So stay safe, stay skeptical, stay informed, and aloha, America.